Hi everyone, Sandra here at Homesteading Ways, and welcome to our first week in a 3-week series on gardening for beginners. Now, maybe you have gardened in the past or it's been a long time, and maybe you could use this as a little bit of a refresher course, but this is going to cover the basics. And today what we're going to discuss primarily is planning out your garden and getting all of your supplies gathered before you need them. Okay, one of the first things that you will need is just a notebook or some paper to write stuff down. You're going to write down what it is probably you want to grow and different websites you visit and seed companies and all kinds of stuff like that. And pretty much most gardeners I know keep a little bit of a notebook every year for their garden, because then they can write down maybe the germination rate of some seeds and when they planted them outside and how well they did that summer and just little stuff like that. And Lord knows we have a lot of information up here, and sometimes we just need to write it down so we can always reference back to it. So yep, get yourself a notebook. And one other thing I want to mention is if you're not on any seed catalog's mailing list, that's okay. There are quite a few really good reputable seed companies out there, and I will leave links down in the description for some of my favorites so you can go and check them out. I like to plant in an organic garden, and I will try and use open pollinated heirloom seeds whenever possible. And we'll get into all that stuff probably in the next episode, but for now that's where we're going to sit. So the next thing you're going to want to do is take a look at your surroundings and where you plan on growing. Where do you plan on having your garden? Now if you're in an apartment and you only have a balcony, that's fine. Go on out there, do it a couple times a day, and see how much sun you're getting and at what time of the day. Usually if you're east facing, that is morning sun, and then of course west facing is afternoon sun. Really, there's no perfect sunlight to get for your garden. It depends on what you're growing. It's the only thing I could say is north is usually not an ideal place to have a garden, as that gets the most shade. I wanted to show you guys how to think outside the box as to where you should maybe consider different spots of planting. But as we're getting snow right now and it's pretty windy, I don't think I can really show you everything, but that spot over there is one of them I plan on planting in. Okay, so trying to show you outside didn't work too well because it is early March and we are ready to have a snowstorm. Crazy wind, snow, and super cold. But anyhow, I just wanted to get you guys to try and think outside of the box a little bit. Plant wherever you have the room and where there is some sun. I have a deck going around the whole front of the cabin. And so I plan on using window boxes, containers, whatever I can across there to plant as much as I can, because I like gardening and the more the better for me. But I have to look at different times of the day when I'm going to get sunlight. In the middle of the summer when it's at its hottest, I don't have a problem having some shade out there because, for instance, lettuce or spinach would do really well in afternoon shade when it's at its hottest in the summer. But let's move on from there to containers and planting your seeds. Now I'm not going to show you about planting the seeds this week, that'll be for next week, but I did want to show you all the different ways you can plant your seeds. Okay, if you go to your local gardening center, nursery, or even some of the big box stores, you will find a lot of setups like this, where you have the planting container inside of a tray like this. Now this is a bigger one, but you can get as many as 72 little pods that will fit inside of one of these. So if you're doing a lot of gardening, that would come in handy. Although I don't recommend going overboard your first year because it can be a little overwhelming, and so maybe start a little bit smaller. But a lot of times these will come with a plastic dome that goes over it, and that is awesome. Those are really nice to have. Every time I buy one of these after the first year, mine either breaks or I lose it somehow. So if you don't have, you know, a dome to go over it, that's okay. Just get yourself some plastic wrap and you can use that instead. You know, here's just another example. You know, this came from a different tray. Things that I use, you can pull them apart. Or if you've bought plants in the past and you save these, and I have a lot of those too, that you save from the nursery, you can use those to plant in. You're just going to want to wash them out. Use a little bit of warm soapy water, rinse them real well, and let them air dry. Just in case there was maybe something not that great in the soil from last year. You want to make sure they're good. So you can use that. You can upcycle. I love upcycling in gardening. Now a lot of people will use these paper egg cartons, and they're nice for a couple of reasons. One is once you plant in here, they can go directly in the ground because the paper will eventually disintegrate away and the plant can grow up through there. Children, these are really nice to use when you're gardening with children. They find it a lot of fun to do, and I get that. And then so you just put your soil in there, you put your seed, and you keep watering it, and then when it's time to plant it outdoors, you just tear it apart. I, however, usually don't use these because they're pretty small, and I would normally have to pot up again from here. But like I said, for kids or for stuff you're going to put directly into the ground while the plant itself is fairly small, these will work out nice. You could do something like sunflowers in here or beans, something simple that you know you or the kids or grandkids would enjoy doing. So you let them, after they get their first set of true leaves, you just have them real wet, tear them apart and plant them in the ground. A couple other containers I'm using myself. This is from vegetables, I believe, I think maybe tomatoes. And I put the soil in there, and then this has this nice little lid on here, and it has its own vents. So that's really well too. When you're first planting your seeds, having that lid on there helps keep that moisture in so they don't dry out that quickly. And I like this because in particular in here I'm growing feverfew, and it needs light to germinate, and the seeds sit very much like on the top of the soil. So this helps out a lot, having that nice clear lid, and I don't have to use the plastic. And the same can be said for this one. Now this has sprouted, and this lid shouldn't be on like this, but you just lift the lid up and you have your soil in there, and this doesn't have vents, so I just poked a few holes on top when the seeds were germinating so there would be a little bit of airflow in there. And now my chamomile is popping up a little bit. So just go ahead and think of what you could use. Yogurt containers, I've used those in the past. They're a good size. You might need to poke little holes in the bottom of them for drainage, but you can use a lot of different food grade containers to get your seedlings started. Now other things you may be looking into are soil. And when I'm starting seeds, I just use a regular store-bought potting soil. This is an organic mix. There really isn't any kind of fertilizers or anything in here. It's just a nice mix to start off with. When you're germinating seeds, you don't need fertilizer. As they grow, yeah, you can add some fertilizer, and we'll go over that at a later time. But for now, you just need good soil. But there are other ways of making your own soil as well, and I'll put a link to that down there. But for me, it's just easier for me to buy, a good soil from the store and start planting in that. And one other thing you might want to look into when you're germinating your seeds is a heat mat, and this is one of them. What it does is it's very, very low heat. And most seeds will germinate quicker if the soil is warm. So you just put this, under whatever you're planting your seeds in. And I don't know how long, depends on your seeds, if it's a week or 2 weeks or whatever till they germinate. You put this under there and they will germinate quicker, by far quicker, by days. And so it's really nice to have one of these. You do remove the mat though once the seeds have germinated. Once you see the little plants coming up, then you do remove the heat. You don't need it any longer. And so you don't have to use this a very long time, but it is really nice to have if you can afford to get one. Other supplies you might want to look at getting at ahead of time are these little spray bottles, because you're going to want to keep your soil nice and moist. You don't want it soggy and too wet, because that could cause damp off and kill your little seedlings. But if you're not doing a lot of seeds, a small bottle like this will do. If you're doing a lot more, or if you're at the stage where your plants are bigger, something like this would work. And you can pick these up in any garden center or store. You just pump it, and then there's a button up here and you can spray. You can adjust the mist. Some plants are more delicate, so they need a really fine mist, and some you can do a little bit stronger of a stream. So this is really nice to have. And then of course you can always rely on your old watering can, and these are nice too, because you can go just directly at the base of the soil and water that way and not worry about getting any of the leaves wet. One other thing you might consider, I know so many people start gardening because they want to grow their own tomatoes, and tomatoes from your home garden are fantastic, and it's a wonderful reason to start gardening. And one thing I do, and what a lot of gardeners do when they're planting tomatoes, is they will add eggshells. You'll start collecting your eggshells if you haven't already, and you just let them dry out, and then you crush them. You can go as far as grinding them if you want, but just, the smaller you crush them, the better. And when you're planting your tomatoes, you will add these to the soil, to the hole where the tomatoes being planted, and this will help to stave off blight. And we'll go over that in probably next week's video. And I just want to let you know about this ahead of time so that you can start saving your eggshells now. And if you don't eat a lot of eggs, maybe ask some friends and family if they can share a few for you. And right now, lastly, not exactly, but kind of, is get yourself some good gardening books. If you can get them from the library, that'd be great, or borrow them from a friend. These are just a few that I recommend. There are a lot of good gardening books out there. But for instance, this book here is Month by Month Gardening in Wisconsin. So I guess, if you're in Texas, you wouldn't want this Wisconsin book. But the point is if you can find a gardening book for your region, that would really help you out. And the month by month is super nice too, because you can't remember it all. And so this is a great reference book to get you started. This is a book on no-till gardening, so that you don't have to turn over your soil every year. This is a method that I really like, and I really encourage people to look into, and it's lasagna gardening. This is a book that I don't necessarily recommend for first-time gardeners, but it's a great book nonetheless. High-yield vegetable gardening. So if you're looking to get as much as you possibly can in your amount of space, this would be a great book to have. And another book that I really recommend, I think it's packed away so I can't show you it physically right yet, is Square Foot Gardening. That's an awesome gardening method, similar to this, where you're getting as much food planted in a smaller amount of space than you normally would in conventional gardening methods. I'm going to put links down in the description box. Please make sure to check that description box. I'll give links to these books and websites and everything else I mentioned. There are quite a few really good websites out there where you can design your gardens. You can keep track of what you want to plant, how much spacing, and just all kinds of really great information on those websites. So I really encourage you to go and check that out. Anyhow, we've reached the end of our first episode on beginning to garden. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope I gave you guys something to think about. If you enjoyed the video, please thumbs up it and subscribe if you're not a subscriber already. It was really nice talking to you, and you take care. By the way, don't forget, be back here next Tuesday for episode 2.